Okay. You should have mentioned it because I could have brought it.
We don't forget things about live ammo. Sniper rifle. 50 caliber.
All right, if we can get seated, we'll get started. So before we went on the break, I left you with some questions that I hope were a little bit perplexing. And, the idea of rights versus privileges. Now, the Texas Constitution has several articles in it, and the very first article in the Texas Constitution is the Bill of Rights. Why is Article 1 the Bill of Rights?
Because that's the most important thing, and the rest of the Constitution should support that.
Right. Why do we have any government? Why don't we just say, well, let's get rid of government, we'll just have an anarchy? Why do we have any government at all? What's the purpose of government? To protect your rights. The Declaration of Independence says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So that the purpose of government is to secure the rights. Well, in a hypothetical situation, let's assume that we all love each other, we're all friends, we just, hug and sway back and forth and sing Kumbaya. All right? If everybody loves each other, there's nothing for the government to do. It's only when I back over your mailbox and you want to start beating my brains out with a baseball bat that the government steps in and says, well, wait a minute, let's settle this peacefully. That's the only purpose for government. So, if you're going to have a constitution for Texas, the purpose of that government is to protect your rights. So you have to list what rights are being protected. That's why almost every state constitution lists the Bill of Rights first. The U.S. Constitution was basically backwards. They wrote the Constitution, they went, oh gosh, we kind of forgot. And so they added a Bill of Rights at the end. Kind of like a patch on the end, even before it really got started. Now, so, if I have a right to do something, I don't require permission. So if I have a right to keep and bear arms, then I don't require a concealed carry permit. They are contradictions in terms. Did George Washington and Thomas Jefferson have gun permits? No, it was ridiculous. You were required to have a gun, basically to defend the United States. So, if they didn't have a gun permit, and we do now, where was the first gun permit? When did we write the first gun permit? Just after what we call the Civil War. It's actually the war between the states. If you have a right to do something, you don't have to ask for permission. White people had rights. Black people were slaves. They had no rights. Well, we passed the 13th Amendment, which says there's no more slavery. Well, gosh, if there's no more slavery, then blacks and whites are all the same, right? So you're going to give the black people guns after you've just had them in chains? And I don't think so. They may be a little upset with us. Giving them a gun may not be a real good idea this week. And so what we did was we gave blacks privileges. Okay? Well, this guy's not going to be really angry with it. We'll let him do it, but not this guy over here, because I can still see in his eyes he's angry. So blacks were given privileges with the 14th Amendment. How about a marriage license? Did Thomas Jefferson and George Washington have a marriage license? No. Today, just about everybody has one. Where was the first marriage license? Right after the Civil War. If two white people want to get married and have children, they have a right to do that. They can do anything they want with their property. Now, whites don't have to ask anybody for permission. Blacks we really didn't care. Two black people wanted to get together. We basically considered that animal husbandry. But what if a black person and a white person want to get married? Oh gosh, we can't have that. We can't allow a mixing of the races now, can we? The white person can do anything they want. The black person can't. The black person has to get permission. So the first marriage licenses were permission for interracial marriages. And I have a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. Now this is Black's Law 3rd edition. This is about 1870s, I think, somewhere in that time frame. And so it's an old book, and I've gotten a copy of it, and I've looked up marriage license. And it says, quote, a license or permission granted by public authority to persons who intend to intermarry. Right there in black and white. A marriage license is for mixed marriages. Well, eventually that was working so well that we just apply a marriage license to everybody. Why do you need permission? If you go to a wedding, how many people are in that contract? Well, you got the man, you got the woman, but that's not all. You've also got the state. The state is there giving you permission. Why? Because you asked. If you ask for permission, that's pretty good evidence that you needed permission. Why would you ask for permission if you don't need it? So you've got the man, the woman, and the state. There are 3 entities in this contract. So now the state has a vested interest in the outcome of this contract. Well, what is the general outcome of a marriage contract? You put a boy and a girl in a dark room for long enough, what's going to happen? Children. So now the state, because they are vested in this contract, they have a vested interest in the children. How can this social worker come to your door and say, you're not being a good parent, and take your kids away? Because they own them. If you have a marriage license, the state has partial ownership in your children. That's how they can demand that your children go to school. They want their children in school, government schools. Now, if you don't get a marriage license, if you just say, hey, you're pretty good looking, you want to sleep together? What do they call that? That's a common law marriage. That's probably the only phrase where anybody knows the phrase common law. Well, what is common law? Well, gosh, I don't know. That's what 2 people... No, it's not. 2 people get married. It is a common law marriage because it is based on property. And we will get to Article 3 of the Constitution later this afternoon, and we will go into the levels of law in great detail. All right? Now, let's turn to page 6. And I want to bring up another concept. This is the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the idea that you don't have to ask permission. You are the top banana. There's nobody to ask. I'm it. I am the decision maker. Now, sovereignty is defined as the status, dominion, power, or authority of a sovereign. Royalty. Supreme and independent power or authority in government. Now, back in, let's say, the early 1700s or late 1600s, who was the sovereign in England? The king. He was the sovereign king. That's basically the only time we understand that word, is the sovereign king. Well, how did the king become sovereign? Well, there was a general idea referred to as the divine right of king.